Good evening again, everyone. It's the first month. It's step one. It's the first Sunday of the new year. We're over the holidays. We're alive. We're well. And I thought that was an appropriate video to get us kicked off for the new year and talking about step one. Because I believe he is a chain breaker for sure. The song hits the nail right on the head. We've walked often that same old road for miles and miles, and we listen to those thoughts in our head over and over and over again, telling us those same old lies. How we've tried to fill those holes inside us with alcohol, with drugs, with sex, with relationships, pornography, food, and you name it, any other way that we can make ourselves feel good to get rid of those feelings, we do it. The feelings of shame and guilt and abandonment and all the things that give us low self-esteem, loss, fear, grief, and anything that we deem that doesn't feel good. We know how to get rid of it. It's time to take some action. As the song says, you got pain. He is the pain taker. He's telling us, and that song is telling us exactly what to do. We need to take the first step. We need to get out of denial and realize that we have a problem and we have to get to work. I kind of entitled this message, Smashing Denial, so you'll hear that a little bit as we go through here. We need to ask God's help. We need to surrender. We need to break the chains that bind us to our addiction. So step one, it says, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Our scripture that I chose today is Romans 7, verses 18 and 19. And it's the Apostle Paul speaking, and he was saying, I know that nothing good lives in me, that is, in my sinful nature. I want to do what is right, but I can't. I want to do what is good, but I don't. I don't want to do what is wrong, but I do it anyway. Does any of that sound familiar? The way we were before, or maybe some of you that are just ready to come into recovery, that sounds very familiar from the things we did over the past few weeks. Maybe for those of you just thinking about coming into recovery, there is a new life laying ahead for you. So even the Apostle Paul recognized he wanted to do good. He wanted to do the next right thing, but he couldn't. He always strayed from what was right. Even with his connections to God and to Jesus, he couldn't do what was right. He couldn't stick to the straight and narrow until he asked for help. I need to say something here as we move forward in this recovery service. And it came to our attention on the green cards that Bill was talking about that often we talk about alcohol. And this is a 12-step meeting. We recognize it as a 12-step meeting, and how it works and whatnot comes out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. But I want anybody who isn't an alcoholic, where alcohol is not your issue or not your problem, to every time you hear that word, replace it with whatever it might be. If it's meth or cocaine or crack or fentanyl, whatever it might be, heroin, replace it. There may be other things that you have issues with besides drugs. It could be smoking a bit of pot. It could be sex, gambling, relationships, food, work, phones, Facebook, gambling, social networking, and the list goes on. So if any of those things are issues with you, if you are powerless over them and your lives are becoming unmanageable because of them, then you're in the right place. And this service is for you and for everybody else that struggles with addiction. If, in fact, you're one of the few people that are sitting here and saying, I have none of those problems, I don't do any of those things, I have nothing that I struggle with, then try putting the word denial in instead of alcohol. Okay? And that will work for you as well, okay? For those of us that work in the addiction field, and there's many of us in this room that do, there are many professional forms and assessments put out there so that we can figure out whether you have an addiction or not. For me, I go back to the standard one that was developed in 1935, 1936, and that is step one. And so when a client comes to me and we're talking about addiction, we'll talk about whether they're powerless over whatever the addiction is, and then we take a hard, long look at the unmanageability. So many of the people I deal with are coming to us out of jails and out of broken homes and out of places that their lives appear to be very, very unmanageable. And that, to me, is a really good screening device for figuring out whether a person has an addiction or not. So I entitled the message Smashing Denial, and that's just what we have to do to get ourselves to get real, admit that there's a problem, and ask for help. I know there are several people in this room tonight that are in the contemplative stage on what they're going to do. They've had some difficulties, they've had some problems, and I know that they're thinking that they want to get into treatment or they want to do something. They want to change their life. It's New Year's, you know, we made it through the holiday season, we're still alive, and it's time to think about making changes. They're thinking that they can solve this problem, or maybe they thought that they could solve the problem on their own. They have one foot in the door, but are worried that it might not be for them. They're worried about what their friends are going to say, what fun they're going to be missing out on if they do something about it. It's strange how we worried about what our friends are going to think when we quit using our substance of choice. But never do we worry about it when we're high, or when we're drunk, when we're causing chaos in everybody's life around us, when we're losing our jobs, losing our families, or even going back to jail. We don't seem to worry about it then. But what will my friends think if I don't use with them, or if I don't drink with them? It's strange how our brain works. I always believe that our brain has a contract on our butt, and it wants us to go out and use, and it will help us make all the excuses to do that. Other excuses that we often hear that why people don't come into recovery: the meetings are great for those guys, but they don't work for me. I really don't want or like the God thing. I'm not really an addict or an alcoholic. I can stop whenever I want. How often have we heard that? I just choose not to. I don't use or drink as much as my friends do, so I can't be as bad as them. Life will suddenly start getting better when we do decide to quit. The heat's off, the police aren't after us, our wife isn't after us, our friends aren't after us anymore. The pain has subsided, so we go back and use again. I'm way too busy with work. That's a favorite one. Way too busy with work. I can't go to meetings, I can't get into recovery. The word God in the steps, or fear or reluctance to work the steps and choosing a sponsor to help you through it, is a huge roadblock for a lot of people. Making a rapid assessment that I don't believe my problem is as bad as everybody else. The social fears: what will I do at parties? What will I tell people when they ask about my involvement, or ask if I go to those meetings? Will I ever have fun again? Questions or concerns about the future that scares people from committing their lives to living one day at a time. These are all excuses. I'm sure if I opened it up to the floor, you could come up with many more that you've heard, or maybe you've even used yourself, or why we can't go to meetings, or why we can't get into recovery. I'm here to tell you that we have to smash the denial. We have to admit our powerlessness and ask for help. Help will come, just like the song says. He is a waymaker. He is a chain breaker. We have to ask God for help. We have to admit our powerlessness. Then, with His help, the chains will be broken and we will get the power to begin our recovery journey. In Mark 11, verse 24, it says, "Listen to me. You can pray for anything, and if you believe, you will have it." And I think the important part in here is if you believe in two things. First off, if you believe in Him, if you believe in your higher power, and also if you believe that you deserve what it is that you're praying for, I think you will get it. It goes on to say that if you're holding a grudge against someone, then forgive, and God will forgive you as well, and your prayers will be answered. Recovery can't be done on your own. I know we spend a lot of times on our own in prayer and meditation, but a recovery doesn't take place in isolation. It happens in the fellowship of AA, NA, CA, CMA, SA, and every other 12-step program that's out there. It's the fellowship that helps us get better. It's the connection to other people. We make connection with like-minded people, men and women who share their experience, their strength, and their hope, and their help with you, and you help them. Through this, we cultivate gratitude, and through this fellowship, we become aware we're not alone. If we participate and share, miracles start to happen. The first step in most things is likely the easiest, Not so in this 12-step program. While it may not be the most difficult, it is a step that causes a lot of people a lot of difficulty. This is a step that if we don't get it and don't work it, recovery becomes pretty elusive. I suppose a literal translation for this step could be as simple as, there is a power, and that power wants to kill me. And if it's left untreated, it certainly will. I believe that we're inflicted with a terminally ill disease, and if we don't do anything about it, it will kill us. It's killed many of our friends and many of our associates already. I see it happening every day of every week in this community. So if we want to take our chemotherapy and put our disease in remission, we need to work the steps. We need to get into recovery and work the program. A character defect that goes along with the steps, or at least it does prior to us starting to work them, is a character defect of denial. We are in denial of how serious our problems have become and still believe that we can change things up just a little bit and things will get better. I couldn't tell you how many times people have come to me and to many other people that work in this business, not so much to quit their addiction, but to learn how to use or how to drink like a normal person. I just want to drink like other people and not get drunk every time and not get into trouble every time and not end up in jail every time I drink. But to learn how to drink like a normal person is not in the cards. We all know we have to quit and quit everything. Or this abstinence thing, abstinence on all substances, just doesn't work. There are many aspects of this step that we need to look at, but tonight we're just going to talk about the powerlessness part of it. In the beginning, we get all caught up with the problem. We try harder to fix the problem with the wrong methods, trying to bring the right results, and it doesn't work. Then we try harder using the same method, expecting different results, and that doesn't happen either. We get the same result, and that's what we call insanity. Step 1 tells us we'd better stop, name the problem, and become willing to admit defeat before we rush in to fix things. So we need to stop and we need to name what the problem is before we rush in to fix it. I suppose this is like being in spiritual kindergarten, and admitting we're in trouble is exactly the very first step. This is the beginning step towards those miracles of peace and serenity and breaking the chain of addiction. To do this, we must be honest, which is a change from the normal. In our addiction, honesty eluded us for the most part. Dishonesty, pretense, evasion, and denial were the norm. The Bible puts a great deal of value on honesty, as does the Big Book. Not just honesty, but what they call rigorous honesty. The falsehood we put off in step 1 is the belief we don't need any help, that we can manage our lives successfully on our own. In step 1, we admitted that this was not true. When we do that, the new and better way of living comes up. But by admitting we're powerless, we suddenly get the power to start our recovery. This part is one that most folks, guys in particular for sure, have the most difficulty with. That is, admitting being powerless over anything is difficult for most of us. Being powerless does not mean that you're incompetent or you're helpless or that you have no power at all. It just means that we could not rely on our own will alone to achieve wholeness and peace. Willpower alone is not powerful enough. We see our powerfulness when we try to solve problems through willpower, determination, commitment, and trying harder, and it's not successful. If there are any changes at all, they're only temporary, and then we go back to our old ways. How many of us tried different methods of controlling drinking? I remember, and maybe Cheryl would even remember this, but I remember for a while trying to drink a drink with alcohol in it, and the next drink with just Coke with no alcohol. And my intention was to have a normal drink on the next one, but I know I went to the bar and I got a double that time, so I made up for the one I'd missed. Then I had a Coke, and then I went into the bar and got maybe a double or a triple, made up for the ones I'd missed. The end result was exactly the same. I got drunk. Right? That was exactly the same end result. It didn't matter how I did it. I wasn't cutting back on my alcohol consumption because I couldn't. We may try to control the drugging or the drinking of someone close to us. I don't know how many of you tried that. Trying, and then trying harder, and then trying hardest will not make us powerful enough to achieve our objective of changing anybody around us. We may promise to not take on more things when asked, but in the heat of the moment, we're powerless to say no. And I'm sure Cheryl can attest to that as well, on my powerlessness over saying no. And she corrects me every time I come home and say, I've agreed to do this or that. And she'll remind me very quickly. If any of you have tried these things, then you know what powerlessness is. For me, my powerlessness comes after I take the first drink, not the second, third, or fourth. I can't stop, no matter how good my intentions are. Remember the words of Paul in our scripture. I have the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out. The point here is that willpower alone is not sufficient to enable us to make permanent changes in our life. Trying harder didn't work for the Apostle Paul, and it doesn't work for us either. Sometimes the answer to our problems comes from a little bit of knowledge that we may have, so go ahead and use that little bit of knowledge. Often problems are completely baffling to us, and we must admit our powerlessness over them. What do we do then? I tell you, it's quite simple, and most of you know the answer. We turn to our higher power, the God of our understanding, and ask for help. This works for any problem in our lives. We have to ask for help through prayer, through meditation, as He is the chain breaker. He can and will restore our lives to sanity if we ask. For those of you that are struggling, you are contemplating doing something, I encourage you to take action. Do something. Don't just think about it. Take action for help to smash the denial and admit your powerlessness and get into recovery, whatever it is you might to do. Talk to one of us after the service, make a plan. And I'll tell you, there are many people here. I'm just going to get a few of them to stand up. Jaron, would you stand up? Okay. Bill, stand up. Ida, would you stand up? Carrie and Shannon, both of you stand up. Now, there may be others in this room, but these people and myself all work in the addiction field. We're all here to help you. If any of you are considering wanting to take the next step, talk to one of us. Talk to all of us. It doesn't matter. And let's make a plan, and let's get you into recovery. Okay. Thanks, you guys. You can sit down.